The night my parents cut me off for refusing to save my useless sister. I thought I'd finally become the villain in our family story. Then my grandfather's will dropped into my lap, and suddenly I was holding the one thing they'd spent their whole lives chasing. I was 32 years old the night my father told me I was no longer his son. Not in a dramatic movie way, with shattered glass and police sirens in the background. Just his voice, flat and tired over the phone, as if he were finally crossing some tedious item off his to-do list. "We're done helping you, Lucas," he said. "You've made your choice. From now on, your sister is our priority. Don't come looking for us when life catches up with you." Click. No yelling. No argument. Just a dead line and the hollow, buzzing silence of my tiny Austin apartment wrapping around me like fog. I sat there on the edge of my secondhand couch, phone still in my hand, staring at the black TV screen that reflected back a warped, exhausted version of me. For a few minutes I honestly thought I might vomit. Because the irony was, I'd never asked them for help. Not with rent. Not with bills. Not even when my truck died and I had to bike 5 miles each way to work in August heat that felt like punishment. They were the ones who called me every few weeks with the latest crisis, the latest emergency involving my younger sister, Chloe. The latest bill that had to be paid or she'd be on the street, as my mother liked to say in a trembling voice. I was the one who bailed them out. Quietly. Consistently. Almost automatically. But that night, the night they disowned me for saying no one time, the past 20 years lined up in my head like dominoes. And somewhere deep down, a part of me that had been bent out of shape since childhood finally snapped back into place. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the kind of place where the Walmart sign was the brightest light for 50 miles and everyone knew who drove what truck. Our little blue house sat at the end of Maple Street, with peeling paint and a front porch that sagged just enough to creak when you stepped onto it. I was the firstborn, the responsible one, the kid with the good head on his shoulders, as everyone liked to say. Straight A student, part-time job at the hardware store by 16, varsity track by junior year. If there was a mold for promising son of working-class parents, I fit it perfectly. Then, 3 years after me, came Chloe. From the moment she arrived, tiny, red-faced, screaming like the world already owed her something. Everything in our house rearranged itself around her. You wouldn't have known that from how my parents talked about her later, though. "Your sister is useless, Lucas. Your sister can't handle real life. Your sister will never make it without us." They said it like a mantra, a lament, a curse. But they also said it as if it were an unchangeable fact, like gravity or winter. Mom would pace the kitchen, a cigarette burning down to the filter between her fingers, ash falling onto the yellowed linoleum, and rant to me while Chloe's music shook the walls upstairs. "We tried with her, we really did," she'd say, rubbing her temples. "But she's nothing like you. You always knew what you wanted. You always worked hard. Chloe? She can't even keep a job at the coffee shop. I don't know where we went wrong." Dad would sit at the table, nodding, calloused hands wrapped around a beer bottle, his jaw tight. "She's just soft," he'd mutter. "World's gonna chew her up." Soft. That was his favorite word for her. The thing is, they weren't entirely wrong. Chloe had always been different. Sensitive in ways that made living in our house feel like trying to breathe underwater. She cried easily, spoke too loudly, laughed at the wrong times. While I was memorizing equations and running sprints on the track, she was filling spiral notebooks with messy drawings and lyrics to songs she wrote, but never sang aloud. She wasn't useless, but she was breakable. And my parents hated anything that looked like weakness. So they did what a lot of scared, tired people do when faced with something they don't understand. They titled it and dismissed it. "She doesn't have what you have, Lucas," Mom would say, patting my shoulder while I did homework at the kitchen table. "Your brain, your discipline, you're our hope. You'll go farther than this town. I know it." At 12, her words made my chest swell. I felt chosen. Important. By 16, they felt like a sentence. Because being the hope in a house that believed one child was useless meant I carried both of them on my back. It meant when Dad lost his job at the factory my junior year and the mortgage lagged behind, I picked up extra shifts at the hardware store and slipped some of my pay into Mom's purse. I never mentioned it, and neither did she. She just hugged me a little tighter the next morning and put an extra slice of bacon on my plate. It meant when Chloe crashed her hand-me-down Honda into a mailbox 2 months after getting her license. It was me who went to meet the furious neighbor, me who did the apologizing, me who helped Dad hammer the metal back into something resembling straight. Mom grounded Chloe for a week, but she also stayed up late with her in the living room, watching sitcom reruns and stroking her hair while Chloe sobbed into a pillow. "You're not mad at her?" I'd asked once, standing in the kitchen doorway, a mix of resentment and confusion churning in my stomach. Mom had given me a look like I'd missed something obvious. "She's not like you, Lucas," she said quietly. "She can't handle it." That became the chorus of my teenage years. She's not like you. She can't handle it. So accommodations were made. Rules were bent. Money appeared when Chloe needed it and disappeared when I did. When I got a full scholarship to Ohio State, Dad clapped me on the back so hard I almost stumbled. "Knew you'd make us proud," he said. "We always told you. Keep your head down and work hard." We took a picture on the sagging porch, me holding my acceptance letter, Mom crying, Chloe squinting against the sun, headphones around her neck. It's still on my phone, buried deep in a folder I try not to open. 3 months later, the college called to inform me that the portion of my financial aid that had depended on my parents' expected contribution hadn't come through. At first, I thought it was a bureaucratic mistake. Then I went home for Thanksgiving. Dad was in the driveway, working under the hood of a car I didn't recognize. It was a little silver Hyundai, cleaner and newer than anything he or Mom had ever driven. "Whose car is that?" I asked. He wiped his hands on a rag, didn't meet my eyes. "Chloe's," he said. "Got it used." "Good deal." I remember the way my stomach dropped, like the world had tilted just a few degrees and nothing lined up anymore. "Used what?" I asked slowly. "With what money?" Mom came out onto the porch then, apron still on, hair frizzed from the oven's heat. "Inside, both of you," she said sharply. "We're not doing this in the driveway." We sat at the kitchen table. The same table I'd done homework at, eaten birthday cakes at, watched my parents fall apart at. The same table where, apparently, entire futures were negotiated without me. "Look," Mom started, leaning forward, hands clenched together. "The college knew you got scholarships. We thought they were covering more than they did. They called about the contribution, and we'd already." She glanced at Dad, who stared at the wood grain as if it had answers. "You already what?" I pushed, heart pounding. I had to fight to get someone in financial aid to keep me enrolled while they reassessed. They were told there was money. Where did it go? Mom swallowed. "Chloe needed help," she said finally. "Her last job cut her hours. Her car died. How was she supposed to get to interviews? We couldn't let her be stranded. Lucas, you're on a full ride. You're smart. You'll figure it out." For a long second, all I could hear was the hum of the refrigerator. Then a strange, harsh sound broke out of my own throat. "A full ride," I said, my voice rising. "Do you have any idea how loans work? How interest works? You signed my financial forms. You sat there with the counselor. You knew I needed you to hold up your end for at least the first year. You're making a scene," Dad muttered. "We're doing the best we can." "For her," I snapped, pointing toward the ceiling where Chloe's music thumped faintly. "Always for her. You took money that was supposed to keep me in school, and you bought her a car." Mom flinched at my tone, then straightened, her eyes sharpening. "She needed it more than you do," she said. "You act like you're being left on the street. You have a dorm, you have meals. You're not starving, Lucas. Stop being dramatic. Your sister, she can't handle life like you can. She's fragile." There it was again. Fragile. Useless. Soft. Words they used to justify everything. It was the first time in my life I truly saw the hierarchy in our family. Not as a vague sense of unfairness, but as a ledger they kept. Lucas, the reliable investment. Chloe, the shaky stock that kept crashing. And when things got tight, they doubled down on the bad stock, hoping it would one day pay off. I left that Thanksgiving early. Back at school, I picked up a second campus job, then a third. I stocked shelves at dawn, tutored freshmen in the afternoons, and closed up the campus library at midnight. My grades slipped from straight A's to a mix of BS and the occasional C. Sleep became a luxury, not a given. I sent home money anyway, because for all my anger, for all my rational understanding that what they'd done was wrong, some part of me was still the boy at the kitchen table absorbing Mom's words like scripture. "You're our hope. You'll go farther than this town." And hope, once planted deep enough, is hard to uproot, even when it's twisted. Years slid by in a blur of work, classes, and calls from home that always seemed to follow the same script. Your sister got laid off again. Your sister's landlord is threatening to evict her. Your sister's, we don't know what's wrong with her, Lucas. She just lies in bed all day. The doctor says it might be depression. Do you know how much therapists cost? Every time, Mom's voice would crack. Every time, Dad's silence on the other end would feel like a weight. Every time, I'd feel guilt flood my chest. Guilt for being the one who escaped, who had a degree, who had a job offer in another state, who had saved up a meager but hard-won emergency fund. So I emptied it, little by little. Just until she gets back on her feet, Mom would say. She just needs time, Dad would mutter. Time, it turned out, was elastic when it came to Chloe. Months stretched into years. Jobs came and went. Boyfriends drifted through like smoke, leaving nothing but more emptiness behind. And through it all, the refrain remained, she's not like you. She can't handle it. There were good moments, too. Nights when Chloe would call me directly, her voice soft and small, apologizing for everything. I know I'm a screw-up, she'd say, half laughing, half crying. You don't have to keep saving me, you know. But she always let me. And I always did. Until that phone call in my apartment in Austin, 10 years after that Thanksgiving, when a line I hadn't even known existed was finally crossed. It wasn't about money that time. Not directly. It was about Grandpa. My father's father, Henry Miller, had always been a quiet presence on the edges of our lives. He lived on a small farm half an hour outside of town, alone after my grandmother passed. He showed up to every birthday with the same gift, a crisp $50 bill tucked into a simple card, his shaky handwriting spelling out, "Proud of you. Love, Grandpa." He didn't say much, but when he did, it was usually something that stuck. Once, when I was 13, I helped him fix a fence post that had rotted through. Sweat rolling down his wrinkled forehead, he leaned on the shovel and said, "People tell you who they are, if you listen long enough. Believe him the first time, save yourself some heartache." Back then, I thought he was talking about neighbors who never returned borrowed tools. I didn't realize he was quietly handing me the key to understand my own parents. When I moved to Texas for a tech job, I called Grandpa once a month. Our conversations were simple, full of weather reports and stories about stubborn cows, but there was comfort in the steadiness of his voice. Then, one afternoon, my dad called. "Your grandpa's in the hospital," he said without preamble. "Stroke. It's bad." The words hit me like a punch. I booked a flight for the next morning without asking if I could afford it. By the time I landed and drove straight from the airport to the small county hospital, Grandpa was gone. We stood around his bed, the three of us, me, Mom, Dad, awkward in our grief. Mom sobbed into a tissue. Dad stared at the tiled floor. I held Grandpa's hand, still warm, and thought of fence posts and $50 bills, and the way he'd always slipped me an extra piece of pie when no one was looking. 2 days later, Dad called again. This time, his voice held a tightness I recognized. "The lawyer's reading the will next week," he said. "We'll all be there. You should come." "I'll be there," I said automatically, still raw. "That's good," he replied. Then, after a pause, "And Lucas? There's something we need to talk about before that." That something, as it turned out, was the beginning of the end. And the moment that would, 3 days later, lead to my father telling me I was no longer his son. The something we needed to talk about turned out not to be about grief or funeral arrangements, or even memories of the man lying in the casket. It was about money. Of course it was. Dad insisted we meet at the house, not at the funeral home, not at the hospital. "Just us," he said. His voice had that tight, businesslike edge I'd learned to dread. I flew back to Austin after the funeral to work 2 days, then turned around and flew back again for the will reading. It felt insane and wasteful, but I'd already said yes. Old habits. When I pulled into the driveway that second time, the sky was bruised with low gray clouds, the kind that made the whole world feel like it was holding its breath. The little blue house on Maple Street looked smaller than I remembered, the paint even more peeled, the porch even more crooked. As soon as I stepped onto the wood, it let out that familiar drawn-out creak. Some part of my body relaxed automatically at the sound, like it thought home still meant safety. Mom opened the door before I could knock. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but there was a kind of alertness in them that didn't match the softness of grief. She hugged me, but it was quick, stiff, like she was checking something off a list. "You made it," she said. Good. Your father's in the kitchen. The kitchen? Of course. Dad sat at the table with an old yellow legal pad in front of him and a pen he'd been picking apart. Tiny blue ink dots freckled the paper like a rash. A half-empty beer bottle sweated beside his elbow. Hey, I said, dropping my duffel near the door. He didn't stand. He just nodded at the chair opposite him. Sit down, Lucas. We don't have much time before we've got to head over to the lawyers. Mom hovered by the sink, pretending to wash a mug that was already clean. Something in my chest tightened. Okay, I said slowly, lowering myself into the hard wooden chair. The same one he'd sat me in to lecture me about grades or curfews. What's going on? Dad tapped the pen against the legal pad, then forced a rough sigh through his nose. You know your grandpa didn't have a lot, he started, eyes fixed somewhere over my left shoulder. Just the farm, the house, some savings. He wasn't rich. I nodded. I know. He still did more for us then. He cut me off with a sharp flick of his hand. Point is, he continued, jaw working. What little there is, we need to make sure it goes where it's actually useful. Useful, I repeated slowly, feeling that words settle between us like something toxic. You mean to Chloe? Mom made a small, almost inaudible sound. Dad's eyes flashed up to mine. I mean to where it can do the most good, he said. You've got a good job. You're doing fine. You've got what? Health insurance, retirement account, all that fancy stuff. You live in a city that pays you in dollars, not in gas cards and casseroles. He said city the way some people say disease. And Chloe? I asked, keeping my voice as even as I could. What does she have exactly? Mom chose that moment to finally turn around, drying her hands on a dish towel even though they weren't wet. You know how she is, Lucas, she said, her tone sliding instantly into that familiar, weary sorrow. Every time she tries something, she gets knocked down. She struggles with everything. If your grandpa leaves you both something, it'll be easier for you to rebuild if you ever need to. She might not get another chance. I leaned back, crossing my arms loosely, more to keep them from shaking than anything. Is that what this is? I asked. You want me to sign something saying I give her my share? Dad's silence was answer enough. He slid the legal pad toward me. The top page was lined with his ugly block letters, a rough draft of something he thought sounded official. I, Lucas Miller, voluntarily waive any right or claim to the inheritance or estate of Henry Miller, including but not limited to. My eyes skimmed the rest before I pushed it back across the table. You're not serious, I said. Dad's jaw clenched. We're not asking you to sleep under a bridge, he snapped. We're asking you to look at the big picture. You think your grandpa knew the realities of your life down there? You think he understood that you're already set up? He probably figured you needed the help more than you do. He was sentimental like that. A bitter laugh clawed up my throat. You mean, I said, he might have tried to be fair for once. Someone in this family might have tried to see me as, what was the word? Useful. Mom's face hardened. Don't you dare turn this around on us, she said, her voice low and sharp. We've given you everything. We sacrificed so you could go to college, so you could have a life. You wouldn't be where you are without us. Images flashed in my brain. The empty line on my financial aid form, the used Hyundai in the driveway, Chloe's rent being paid with money that had been promised to my education. I swallowed. I'm not saying you never did anything for me, I said carefully. I'm saying you also took from me when it suited you. And I went along with it because you told me it was my duty. To you, to Chloe, to the family. Dad slammed his palm on the table, making the beer bottle wobble dangerously. We are your family, he barked. And right now, this family needs you to do the right thing. You don't need this inheritance. Your sister does. If you love her, if you care about us, you'll sign. We can have Mr. Collins witness it before the reading. Make it clean. There it was. The full picture. Not just a casual suggestion. A planned ambush. You talked to the lawyer about this? I asked slowly, before even knowing what's in the will. Dad snorted. I know my father, he said. He'd split it down the middle or some old-fashioned nonsense. He never understood that some people can't be trusted with money. Your sister, she's not responsible. She'll blow it on God knows what in 6 months. Unless we control how it's used. Unless we do what's best for her. How convenient, I said softly. Mom's eyes flashed. Don't start with that tone, Lucas, she snapped. You sound ungrateful, do you know that? After everything we did for you. After all the times we went without so you could have more. I stared at them. At my parents. at the two people I had spent my whole life trying to protect, impress, save. I thought of Grandpa's calloused hands on the fence post. People tell you who they are if you listen long enough. They had been telling me who they were for years. I just hadn't wanted to believe them. I took a breath, exhaled slowly. I'm not signing it, I said. The room went very still. Dad's eyes narrowed. Don't be hasty, he said. You're upset. You just lost your grandfather. This isn't the time to be selfish. Selfish? It was almost funny. I'm not being selfish, I said quietly. I'm setting a boundary. I've given up a lot for this family. I've helped pay Chloe's rent. I've sent money when you were behind on bills. I took on loans because you spent what was supposed to be my tuition. And every time, you told me I had to because I was the strong one, the capable one, the useful one. I tapped the legal pad with one finger. This is a line I won't cross. If Grandpa wanted me to have something, I'll hear it from his lawyer and decide what to do with it myself. I'm not giving you a blank check to do whatever you want with it in Chloe's name. Mom's face had gone white. You'd really do that to your sister? She whispered. After all her struggles? You'd take from her. I'm not taking anything from her, I said, feeling my voice shake now, not with fear, but with an anger that had been fermenting for a decade. I'm just not letting you take from me before anything's even on the table. Dad stood then, the chair scraping back. I knew it, he said, his voice low and shaking. Austin changed you. Money changed you. You think you're better than us now. Heat flooded my face. This isn't about being better, I said, getting to my feet too. It's about finally refusing to be used. We stood there, two grown men glaring at each other over a battered kitchen table, the ghost of a farmer in a flannel shirt hanging somewhere between us. Mom stepped in, eyes glassy. Lucas, please, she said. We can't lose you both. Not now. Just think about it. For us. For Chloe. We're scared. We're old. We don't know what will happen to her when we're gone. The word gone twisted something deep in my chest. Fear, guilt, love, they all tangled together, trying to pull me back into my old role. For a moment, I almost broke. Then I heard another echo. Not Grandpa this time, but my own voice, 10 years younger, standing in this same kitchen asking where my financial aid money went. Where it's useful, Mom had said then too. I have thought about it. I replied now, more gently. A lot. I love you. I love Chloe. But I'm not signing. That's my final answer. The look Dad gave me then wasn't just anger. It was assessment. Like he'd just discovered a crack in a tool he'd been using for years and decided it wasn't worth the repair. Fine, he said. Do what you want. He tossed the legal pad in the trash and stalked out of the room. Mom watched him go, then looked at me, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite name. You'll regret this, she whispered. When you see what we're dealing with, when you see what your sister is like without us, you'll regret being so hard. She turned away before I could answer. The lawyer's office smelled like dust, coffee, and old money. It was on the second floor of a brick building downtown, the kind built in the 50s and never updated, except for a new sign bolted crookedly above the door. Collins and Sons, attorneys at law. We sat in leather chairs that had seen better days. Dad on one side of me, arms crossed, jaw clenched. Mom on the other, twisting a tissue until it was a wrinkled rope. Chloe was across from us in a faded hoodie, one knee bouncing, eyeliner smudged. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. She kept glancing at the door as if at any moment Grandpa might walk in and tell us this was all a bad joke. Mr. Collins, a thin man with wispy gray hair, sat behind a massive oak desk, shuffling papers. Thank you all for coming, he said, his tone professionally solemn. Your grandfather was a good man. Practical. He left very clear instructions. I tried to listen, but my mind kept drifting, to fence posts, to warm $50 bills, to the legal pad now sitting in the trash at home. Mr. Collins cleared his throat and began. As per the last will and testament of Henry Miller, dated 8 months ago. He went through the formalities first. Debts to be settled. Accounts to be closed. A small amount set aside for the upkeep of the tiny cemetery where my grandmother was buried. Then he got to the part everyone was holding their breath for. Regarding the disposition of Mr. Miller's assets, he read, glancing up briefly, he has outlined specific bequests. My heart beat hard in my throat. To his daughter-in-law, Margaret Miller, Mr. Collins continued, he leaves the sum of $5,000 in recognition of her care and meals shared over the years. Mom gasped softly, pressing the tissue to her mouth. I saw tears spring into her eyes. To his granddaughter, Chloe Miller, he went on. He leaves the sum of $5,000, with the following note, which he asked me to read aloud. He unfolded a separate, handwritten page and squinted at it for a second before reading. Chloe, he read, you are brighter than they ever let you believe. This is not enough to change your life, but I hope it reminds you that I saw you. Spend it on something that makes you feel alive, not just less afraid. I looked at Chloe. Her mouth was slightly open. Tears had gathered, but not yet fallen. She swallowed hard. Then Mr. Collins turned to the next page. And as for the remainder of the estate, he said, his voice steady, consisting of the farm property, the house, equipment, and remaining savings accounts, Mr. Miller leaves all of it to his grandson, Lucas Miller. The room went still. It was like the air had been sucked out, leaving only the thud of my own pulse in my ears. All of it. Dad's voice cracked through the silence, sharp and disbelieving. That can't be right. He wouldn't. He knows Henry always said the farm would be mine. Mr. Collins adjusted his glasses, unfazed. He originally drafted a will that left the farm to you, he said, about a year and a half ago, but he revised it 8 months ago. These are his most recent, legally binding wishes. He lifted another paper, thicker, covered in Grandpa's looping scrawl. There is also a letter addressed to you, Lucas, he added, turning to me. He asked that I give this to you privately after the reading. Dad was shaking his head, face going red. This is ridiculous, he said. I'm his son. I worked that land. I helped him fix that roof. How can he just? Mr. Miller, Collins interrupted gently. I understand this is a shock, but your father was of sound mind. He had his reasons. And for what it's worth, there are instructions here about certain conditions. He glanced at me then, something like apology in his eyes. Conditions? I repeated, my voice finally clawing its way back. Yes, he said. Your grandfather had a plan. One that, if followed, could still benefit the whole family. He tapped the stack of papers. But the legal reality is this. As of his date of death, the entirety of the estate, minus the specific sums mentioned, belongs to you, Lucas. Upside down. The phrase flashed through my mind like a neon sign. I thought of the legal pad in the trash, of my parents' certainty that they could rearrange whatever Grandpa decided, of Dad's voice at the kitchen table. You don't need this inheritance. Your sister does. For the first time in my life, I was the one in the room holding the card they all wanted. And judging by the way my father was staring at me now, eyes burning with a mix of shock, betrayal, and something uglier, that changed everything. Congratulations, son, he said quietly, his voice stripped of warmth. Looks like you got what you wanted after all. I stared back at him, that old guilt swelling, colliding with the fresh memory of his demand that I sign my rights away. I hadn't asked for this, but whether I wanted it or not, Grandpa had handed me more than land and savings. He'd handed me a choice, and my parents had just made it very, very clear where I stood in theirs. Dad's words hung in the air like smoke that wouldn't clear. Looks like you got what you wanted after all. I opened my mouth to say I hadn't wanted any of this, that I'd have traded every dollar for one more afternoon fixing fences with Grandpa. But Mr. Collins cleared his throat gently, cutting through the tension. There is also the matter of the conditions I mentioned, he said. Mr. Miller left some guidelines for how he hoped things would be handled. Lucas, if you'd like, we can step into my office after this and go over them privately. Privately? Dad snapped. Since when is anything in this family private? Mr. Collins did not rise to the bait. He folded his hands calmly on the desk. Since your father specifically requested it, he said. He gave me explicit instructions. I am obligated to follow them. Dad's nostrils flared. For a second I thought he might actually reach across the desk and grab the papers. But years of small-town conditioning, or maybe just the knowledge that assaulting your lawyer isn't a great move, kept him anchored to his chair. Are we done here then? Mom asked tightly, voice thin. Legally, yes, Collins said. I'll handle the paperwork for the transfer. You'll each need to sign some documents before you leave, acknowledging that you've received and understood the terms. Chloe's voice came out so quietly I almost missed it. He left me something, she said. Grandpa. For me. She sounded less surprised by the amount than by the fact that he'd addressed her directly. Seen her? Yes, Mr. Collins said, his expression softening. He did. I can give you a printed copy of that note. if you'd like. She nodded, eyes shining. Dad pushed back his chair so abruptly it scraped a harsh line in the floor. Fine, he said. Let's get this over with. We each signed where we were told to. Mom's hands shook. Dad's signature was a violent slash. Chloe took the pen with exaggerated care, biting her lip. When it was my turn, I looked at the line for beneficiary, Lucas Miller, at the words full title and sole owner, and felt my stomach twist. I signed anyway. As we left the office, Collins touched my elbow. If you have 10 minutes, he murmured, I can show you your grandfather's letter. It might help you understand. I glanced at my parents' rigid backs heading toward the stairwell, at Chloe trailing behind them like a shadow. Yeah, I said quietly. I'll stay. He led me down a short hallway to a side room that smelled like old coffee and copier toner. The furniture was mismatched, a sagging couch, a metal filing cabinet with drawers that didn't quite close. On the small table in the center sat a single, thick envelope with my name on it. To Lucas, in Grandpa's careful block letters. My throat tightened just seeing it. I'll give you some privacy, Collins said, closing the door behind him. For a moment, I just sat there, staring. The last time Grandpa had written my name was probably on a birthday card. Always the same simple message. Proud of you. Love, Grandpa. I slid my finger under the flap and opened it. The letter inside was several pages, front and back, his handwriting a bit shakier than I remembered, but still steady. I took a breath and began to read. Lucas, if you're reading this, it means the good Lord's finally collected his due, and I'm not here to argue about it. Don't let your grandmother fuss too much over me. She's waited long enough already. I huffed out an involuntary, choked laugh. Typical. I'll get to the point, the letter went on. You always liked that about me. I left the farm and the bulk of what I had to you on purpose. Your father will be angry. Your mother will be hurt. They will tell you it isn't fair. Maybe they're right in some ways. Life rarely is. But I've watched this family a long time, Lucas. I watched your father grow up in this house, and I watched the way he learned to believe money was a thing you grab quick before someone else does. I watched your mother stretch a dollar till it screamed, and I watched how fear made her hold on too tight to whatever looked like security. And I watched you and Chloe grow up in a house that kept score in ways you didn't ask for. Your parents love you both. I don't doubt that. But they love from their fear. Fear of poverty, fear of shame, fear of losing control. That fear has rotted some things that shouldn't have rotted. I saw what they did with your college money, even if they never told me. Your mother thinks she's subtle. She isn't. I saw how many times you stepped up when they were in trouble. How quick you were to send what you had. I also saw how they came to expect it. You have been the safety net in this family for a long time, boy. And safety nets wear out. Chloe is not useless. You know that. I know that. But she has been told she is so many times it's become a kind of prophecy. Your parents, meaning well, keep rescuing her in ways that keep her from ever finding her own ground. If I left this farm to your father, he'd sell it inside a year. He'd tell himself it was for the best. For the kids. For bills. For emergencies. It'd be gone before any of you had a chance to think straight. If I split it evenly, you'd give your portion away the first time your mother called crying. I know this because I know you. You're a good man, sometimes to your own detriment. So I decided to be the villain now, so you don't have to be later. I am leaving it all to you, not because I think you love me more than they do, and not because I love you more than them, but because you are the only one I trust to make a plan that isn't driven by panic. Here's what I hope you'll consider doing with it. You're a grown man. You'll make your own choices. But an old man's allowed to have hopes. I paused, wiped my eyes with the heel of my hand, annoyed at myself for crying, then kept reading. First, the farm. If you want to live here, live here. If you want to sell it, sell it. You don't owe anyone a museum to my memory. This land took enough out of my bones. Don't let it take yours if your heart's not in it. If you do sell it, I ask that you keep back a good portion for yourself. Put it someplace safe. You are allowed to be safe, Lucas. You are allowed to build a life that isn't one long emergency. Second, Chloe. I believe there is something bright in that girl that hasn't been given good soil. I also believe that handing her a pile of cash with no fence around it would be like handing a bottle to a man trying to get sober. If you're willing, set aside a share, what you think is fair, in a trust with conditions that are about building, not rescuing. Money that goes to therapy, to schooling, to a place to live that she can maintain, to tools for whatever she's meant to do in this world. Not to boyfriends' cars or quick fixes. Control it yourself or with someone you trust. Don't let your parents at it. Not because they are evil, but because they are tired and afraid, and afraid people make bad choices with other folks' safety nets. Third, your parents. I am not telling you to cut them off. That's a road every man has to walk in his own boots. What I am saying is, do not put the rope for your own hanging in their hands. If you help them, let it be with boundaries you can live with. A set amount, a timeline, maybe nothing at all, if that's what peace costs. You owe them gratitude for what they did right. You do not owe them your life. Finally, and this one you may not hear right away, it is not your job to fix this family. You tried. Lord knows you tried. You've been patching holes in this boat since you were old enough to hold a hammer. But some leaks aren't yours to seal. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step off a sinking ship and build something solid on shore. Whatever you choose, I trust you. I see you. Not as useful. Not as the strong one. Just as Lucas. Don't let them convince you that using this inheritance to protect your own future is selfish. It's how you break a pattern that's older than you. If you find it in your heart down the line to help your sister, do it because you want to, not because your mother's tears or your father's anger bully you into it. And if they tell you you're not their son for choosing differently, remember this. Blood runs one way, but love can run too. Family is what you build, not just what you're born into. I'm proud of you. I always was. Love. Grandpa. By the time I reached the end, the words had blurred. I had to blink hard, 2, 3 times, to see clearly again. On the table beside the letter was a practical addendum in Colin's neat print. Instructions about trusts, about local banks, about legal mechanisms to do exactly what Grandpa had suggested. It was eerie, the way the man had seen through all of us. Through me. Through my parents' fear. Through Chloe's learned helplessness. Through the way money had become both a weapon and a lifeline in our family. I sat there a long time, the letter resting in my lap, feeling equal parts seen and exposed. When I finally stepped back into the main office, my parents and Chloe were gone. Only Mr. Collins remained, stacking files. They left. I asked, voice rough. They said they had things to do, he replied carefully. Your mother asked me to remind you that their door is open. For discussion. Translation. For negotiation. I folded Grandpa's letter back into its envelope and tucked it into my backpack like a talisman. I read what he wrote. I said, about the trusts. The conditions. Is all that possible, legally? Absolutely, Collins said. He set it up so you'd have options. You're not bound to do any of it, but if you choose to, it's straightforward. I can help you draft whatever you decide. No rush. Grief and decisions don't mix well. A small, humorless smile tugged at my mouth. You sound like him, I said. He chuckled. Henry was stubborn, he said. But he wasn't stupid. He loved you kids. In his own gruff way. Kids. Plural. That mattered. On my way out of the building, my phone buzzed. Mom. I hesitated, then answered. Hey, I said. You done in there? She asked without greeting. Her voice was tight, brittle, like glass about to crack. We've been waiting out in the car for half an hour. I stopped on the landing, looking through the stairwell window at the parking lot. Their old sedan sat under a bare maple tree, the windshield streaked with dirt. I couldn't see them through the glare. I read his letter, I said. He explained why he did what he did. She was silent for a heartbeat. Then, explained why he chose you over us, you mean. My grip on the phone tightened. That's not what he said, I replied. I don't care what he said, she snapped, the brittle edge giving way to something sharper. We spent our lives taking care of him, Lucas. Your father broke his back on that farm. And in the end, your grandpa leaves everything to you, the one who ran off to Texas. And you just what? Accept it. I closed my eyes, inhaled slowly. I didn't ask for this, I said. I didn't know he was going to do it. But you're not giving it up, she shot back. You're not doing the right thing. The right thing. I could feel the old guilt rising, thick and familiar, like mud trying to drag me under. I'm not signing away my rights in a parking lot, I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. I need time to think, to grieve, to figure out how to do this in a way that doesn't just repeat the same patterns. Grandpa had some ideas about that. I want to respect them. Patterns, she repeated mockingly. Is that what your therapist taught you? Patterns? Boundaries? Big words that mean you don't have to take care of your own flesh and blood. Her words landed like slaps. The worst part was how close they came to the bone. I had started therapy a year earlier, quietly, after a panic attack at work had left me gasping in a stairwell. I hadn't told them. They wouldn't have understood. This isn't about not taking care of anyone, I said. It's about not being the only one who does. Grandpa didn't want the farm sold overnight to plug holes. He didn't want Chloe handed cash she can't handle. He wanted me to build something stable. For me. For her, maybe. But not at the cost of my own life. There was a long pause. When Mom spoke again, her voice was very quiet. Very cold. So that's it, she said. You're choosing him over us. Over your sister. I'm choosing not to let you make this decision for me. I answered, surprising even myself with the steadiness in my tone. You can be mad. I get it. But I'm not the villain here. Her breath hissed through the line. We raised you, she said. We gave you everything. And this is how you repay us? Enjoy your farm, Lucas. Don't bother coming by the house. Your father's done. The line went dead. I drove out to the farm that evening with Grandpa's letter on the passenger seat. The gravel driveway crunched under my tires, the sound achingly familiar. The white farmhouse stood stubbornly against the darkening sky, paint peeling in places but solid, like it had always been. The barn leaned a little more than it had last summer. The fields lay fallow under a thin layer of snow. I got out of the truck and just stood there for a minute, inhaling cold air that smelled like hay, diesel, and distant wood smoke. It hit me then, in a way it hadn't in the hospital or the lawyer's office. He was really gone. The man who'd stood exactly where I was standing now. Countless mornings, mug of coffee in hand, watching the sun claw its way over the horizon. My chest hurt. I walked up to the porch, the boards solid under my boots, and unlocked the front door with the key Collins had pressed into my palm. Inside, everything was exactly as he'd left it. The old brown recliner by the window, the crocheted blanket my grandmother had made, folded neatly over its back. The tiny television on the stand, an ancient Western paused mid-scene. A half-finished crossword sat on the side table, reading glasses on top. I wandered through the rooms like a ghost, touching things without quite registering them. Framed photos on the wall, a kitchen drawer full of mismatched silverware, a coat hanging on the back of a chair. In the small office off the kitchen, the one that smelled like dust and motor oil, I found his desk. On it sat a faded ledger, a jar of pens, and, pinned to the corkboard above, an index card on which he'd written in big, block letters. Don't let fear spend what love built. I exhaled slowly. Subtle as always, I muttered. I sat down in his old swivel chair and pulled out my notebook. For the next 2 hours, I wrote. I wrote numbers, estimates Collins had given me of what the farm might fetch if sold, what the savings accounts totaled, what setting up a trust for Chloe might look like. I wrote memories of being 12 and Grandpa teaching me how to drive the tractor, of being 19 and hiding in the barn to avoid another argument between Mom and Dad, of being 27 and calling him from Austin to ask how he'd managed to stay married for 50 years. We fought, he'd said then. We hurt each other. Then we decided to do better. Both of us. Not just one doing all the work. And I wrote questions. Who was I if I wasn't the one who always said yes? What did it mean to be entrusted with something that felt too heavy and too holy all at once? How did I honor a dead man's faith in me without letting it become just another burden I carried alone? When my hand finally cramped, I set the pen down and rubbed my eyes. Outside, night had fully fallen. The house creaked around me like an old ship. My phone buzzed. This time, it wasn't Mom. It was Chloe. I hesitated, then answered. Hey, I said softly. You okay? A shaky breath crackled down the line. I don't know, she said. Are you? I huffed out something that wasn't quite a laugh. Loaded question. Yeah. Silence stretched between us. Not comfortable, but not hostile either. Just uncertain. I heard Mom on the way home, she said finally. Going off about you. About Grandpa. About the farm. She paused. She's not okay. I know, I said. Dad, he's not saying much, she replied. Which is worse, honestly. I could picture it. Him sitting in his recliner, face a weather system you couldn't predict, beer untouched on the table. I'm sorry you're caught in the middle, I said. She snorted softly. Story of my life, she murmured. Then, more loudly. Look, I wanted to say. Grandpa leaving you the farm? It makes sense. I blinked. What? You were the only one who ever showed up out here if something broke, she said. Dad always meant to. But you actually did. And Grandpa, he liked you. He talked about you like like you were more than his smart grandson. He called you stubborn in a good way. My throat tightened. He loved you too, I said. You know that, right? He left you something. 5 grand in a pep talk, she said dryly. Yeah, I got the speech. You're brighter than they think. Very hallmark of him. There was an edge under the joking I recognized. Fear. Defensiveness. You are, I said. Brighter than they let you be. She didn't answer that. I know they want you to give it all to them, she said instead. Or to me by proxy. Yeah, I said quietly. They do. A pause. Are you going to? I stared at the index card above the desk. Don't let fear spend what love built. No, I said. I'm not. She let out a long breath. Not quite relief, not quite disappointment. Good, she said, to my surprise. I mean, good if it means you're not just doing the same thing again. For their sake. For mine. Her voice dropped. Every time they bail me out, it feels like I disappear a little more. Like the part of me that might figure it out shrinks. It's nice in the moment. It's hell later. I close my eyes. Then what do you want? I asked. Honestly. She laughed, short and bitter. A personality transplant? She said. I don't know, Luke. I'm tired. I'm scared. I mess up a lot. But I don't want to be their project forever. Or yours. I want options. And a chance not to fail at all of them. An idea, half-formed before, solidified then. Something that aligned with Grandpa's wishes, with my therapist's words about enabling versus supporting, with my own exhausted heart. I'm thinking about setting up something for you, I said slowly. Not cash in your hand. A fund. For therapy. For classes, if you want them. For first and last month's rent on a place you choose, once you've got some stability. I'd manage it. You wouldn't have to go through mom and dad. Silence. Like strings attached money? She asked cautiously. Like guardrails, I said. Not because I don't trust you at all. Because I don't trust the way everyone else has trained you to treat money. Including me. I've just thrown it at emergencies. That hasn't helped you build anything. She was quiet for a long time. Would I have to get better first? She asked eventually. Before you decided I was worth it? My chest ached. You're worth it now, I said. The point would be to help you have tools so the next time life hits, you have more than just us to catch you. But I won't force it. If it feels like another leash, tell me. A shaky laugh. Everything's a leash in this family, she muttered. Then, softer, but yeah, I'd like that. The option, I mean. I don't trust myself with a big chunk of money. I'd hate myself after. This feels less like a test I'm doomed to fail. Relief loosened something tight in my shoulders. Then I'll talk to Collins, I said. We'll set it up when I get back to Austin. You'll have to sign some things. There'll be rules. But they'll be ours. Not mom and dad's. She sniffed. They're going to hate that, she said. You know that, right? You going through Grandpa's lawyer instead of them. I know, I said. They already do. We were quiet for a moment. I'm sorry they pulled you into that kitchen ambush, I added. With the legal pad. The do the right thing speech. You heard about that? She asked, surprised. I lived it, I said. She exhaled slowly. I didn't agree with it, she said. For what it's worth. I told Mom in the car it was gross. She told me I didn't understand real life. I smiled sadly. Welcome to the club. She hesitated. They're not going to forgive you, she said finally. Not easily. Maybe not ever. I know, I said. And you're still going to do this? I am, I said. There was a rustle on her end, like she'd shifted the phone. Okay, she whispered. Then, for whatever it's worth, I'm with you. The line crackled softly between us. It was the first time in my life I'd heard those words from someone in my family without an asterisk attached. Back in Austin, the world narrowed into 2 parallel tracks. On one, life went on. I went to work. I fixed bugs, sat in meetings about user acquisition, listened to my boss talk about KPIs and product roadmaps. My coworkers offered generic condolences when I mentioned my grandfather had passed, then went back to arguing about code style. On the other track, an entire legacy shifted hands hundreds of miles away. Mr. Collins emailed me drafts of trust documents. I reviewed them late at night at my tiny kitchen table, Grandpa's letter open beside my laptop like a stern overseer. We created the Henry Miller Education and Stability Fund, in Chloe's name, with me as trustee. Disbursements for therapy, for training programs, for housing assistance contingent on her maintaining some form of income, even if part-time. Nothing to parents. Nothing for loans, to boyfriends, or impulse purchases. Collins handled the property transfer. I learned more about land taxes, property assessments, and agricultural exemptions in a month than I'd ever wanted to know. The farm wasn't worth millions, not even close. But between the sale of some old equipment and the valuation of the land itself, prime location for a developer if I ever went that route, and Grandpa's modest but carefully tended savings, it was more money than anyone in my family had ever seen at once. And every time a number updated in a document, my phone would vibrate with another call I didn't want to answer. At first, I picked up, "Have you come to your senses yet?" Dad would ask. Or, "The furnace went out. You going to let your mother freeze while you sit on a pile of your grandfather's money?" I sent money for the furnace. A boundary, I told myself. A one-time thing. A way to keep them from freezing to death while we figured out our new normal. Normal never came. Every week, there was a new crisis. The car needed repairs. Medical bills arrived. Chloe had a breakdown. The rent went up. The neighbor was threatening to sue over a fallen tree. I helped where I could without gutting the accounts Collins was still formalizing. I said no more than I ever had in my life, but I still said yes far too often. Each no landed like a stone in the growing wall between us. Then came the call that would finish building it. I remember exactly where I was. On my couch, half watching some forgettable show, a cold pizza box open on the coffee table. It was a Thursday. The farm sale had just gone through a week earlier. The first installment of funds had hit the estate account. Mom's name flashed on the screen. I sighed, rubbed my eyes, and answered, "Hey, Mom." She didn't bother with greetings. "Your father's done," she said, her voice sharp. "Raw. He says if you're not going to step up, you're on your own." My stomach clenched. "What happened?" I asked warily. "What happened?" she repeated, incredulous. "What happened is the property tax bill came. What happened is the washing machine died. What happened is your sister had a panic attack and we had to take her to the ER. Again, what happened is we are drowning here, Lucas, and you're the one sitting on a lifeboat." "I'm not." I started, then stopped. I could hear the hysteria bubbling under her words, the exhaustion. "I've sent you thousands in the last 3 months," I said instead, keeping my voice as calm as I could. "For the furnace. For the hospital. For Chloe's meds. I've set up that fund we talked about for her. I'm paying Colin's fees so you don't have to. I'm not exactly hoarding gold bars over here." "It's not enough," she snapped. "We can't keep doing this piecemeal. You need to do the right thing and put the farm in your father's name where it belongs. Or at least sell the damn thing and give us our share before someone else takes it. That money was supposed to save this family, not your retirement." The familiar guilt tried to claw its way back. I pushed it down. "Grandpa didn't want it sold in a panic," I reminded her. "He was clear. He trusted me to take my time, to make a plan. Giving it all to you right now would just keep everything the same. The same fights, the same emergencies, the same holes." "Listen to yourself," she said. "You sound just like those people on TV. Boundaries. Patterns. You think you're better than us now. Too good to help your own parents." Heat rose in my face. "I am helping," I said, my tone slipping despite my effort. "I'm just not handing you the deed and walking away. I won't undo what Grandpa tried to do just because it doesn't feel good in the moment." She was quiet for a second. When she spoke again, her voice was ice. "So that's it," she said. "You've made up your mind. Money over blood. A dead man's letter over the people who raised you." "That's not." I didn't get to finish. Dad's voice cut in, rough and final. "We're done helping you, Lucas," he said. "You've made your choice. From now on, your sister is our priority. Don't come looking for us when life catches up with you." The words from that first scene. Again, only this time, I felt every syllable land in my chest. "Dad," I said, "I haven't asked you for anything in years. You know that." Click. The line went dead. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, the dial tone buzzing like a flatline. On the coffee table, a slice of pizza grew cold. On my laptop, an email from Mr. Collins sat unread, subject line: "Trust documents finalized, ready for signature." Somewhere in Ohio, in a little blue house on Maple Street, my parents had decided I was no longer their son. And somewhere under a layer of winter frost, on a square of land with a peeling white farmhouse, a man who'd trusted me to break a cycle lay buried. For a long time, I just sat there, breathing in and out, waiting for the old reflex to kick in. The reflex that said, "Call back. Apologize. Offer more. Fix it." It didn't come. Instead, something quieter settled over me. Not peace. Not yet. But clarity. They had chosen fear. Again, I was finally starting to choose something else. And I had a stack of signed papers, a farm, a fund for my sister, and a dead man's letter telling me, in no uncertain terms, that was exactly what I was supposed to do. In the weeks after that phone call, silence grew where family used to be. At first, I kept expecting my mother's name to flash on my screen again. I rehearsed imaginary conversations in the shower, on my commute, lying awake at 2 in the morning. "I'm sorry," I yelled. "We overreacted. We just miss him." None of those calls came. Instead, there were practical emails from Mr. Collins, signature requests, updates on the trust we'd set up for Chloe, and there were texts from Chloe herself. At first, they were small. "Started with a new therapist today. She doesn't suck. Use some of the fund for a painting class. Remember when we used to draw on the porch and Mom would yell about the markers on the steps?" Then, slowly they grew. Got a part-time job at an art supply store. Boss isn't a creep. When therapist says I confuse my personality with my diagnoses. That my brain is not a moral failing. Feels weirdly hopeful. Her life was still messy. There were bad days where she texted me in all caps from the floor of her apartment, panic-tight in every word. There were weekends she went dark and then resurfaced with apologies I told her she didn't know me. But there was a pattern shift, subtle but real. When she hit a wall, she called her therapist instead of our mother. When she needed money, she emailed me a copy of a bill and asked if it fit the trust's rules, instead of passing it through Dad with a side of guilt. When an ex showed up trying to borrow rent, she told him no and blocked his number. Then she texted me, fingers shaking, to say she'd never done that before. Meanwhile, I did something that startled even me. I went back to the farm for a week and didn't decide anything. I slept in Grandpa's bed, the old springs groaning under my weight. I drank coffee on the porch in the mornings, the mug warm in my hands, watching the light slowly bleed into the fields. I fixed a loose step. I oiled a squeaky door. I replaced a broken window pane. The neighbors stopped by. Mrs. Jenkins from 2 properties over brought a casserole and 100 stories about Grandpa's stubbornness. A younger couple, the Rodriguezes, who rented their pasture for cattle grazing, asked gently what my plans were. "You selling?" Mr. Rodriguez asked. "If you are, we'd like first crack at leasing, at least. Be ashamed to see this turned into another storage facility." I looked at the land, at the line of trees along the back fence glowing gold in the afternoon sun, and felt the weight of the decision press on me. "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. "But if I do, you'll be the first to hear." On my last night there, I sat in Grandpa's recliner, his letter in my lap, and made a list. Keep the farm and move back? Sell the farm and stay in Austin? Rent it out to a working farmer and use the income to build something else? Every option had a cost. Leaving my tech career, leaving my friends, leaving the city I'd built a fragile new life in, or leaving behind the physical piece of my grandfather's legacy, the place where I'd first learned what hard work felt like in my bones. In the end, the decision came not as a bolt of insight, but as a quiet knowing that settled in my chest. I couldn't go back to being a full-time farmer. That life had been my grandfather's dream, not mine. But I also couldn't stomach the idea of the land being bulldozed for a strip mall and a parking lot. So I called the Rodriguezes. We drew up a lease. They would work the land, pay rent, maintain the fields. I would keep the title, the right to say no if a developer came knocking. Grandpa's soil would keep growing something, and I would have a steady, modest income stream I didn't have to bleed for in a corporate office. Back in Austin, I told my therapist all of this. She smiled in that way that suggested she'd been quietly rooting for me to arrive here. "You made a choice that honors both your needs and your grandfather's wishes," she said. "How does that feel?" "Grown up," I said, half joking. Then, more seriously, "It feels like I'm not just reacting anymore. To them, to crises, to old scripts. And how does it feel to sit with the fact that your parents might never approve of those choices?" she asked. That one I didn't answer right away. It hurt. Of course it did. Some part of me, the boy at the kitchen table, the teenager with the hollow pride of being the hope, still wanted their blessing. Still wanted to hear, just once, that I was enough exactly as I was. But every time I pictured bending now, handing over the deed, draining the accounts to keep the peace, I saw my grandfather's shaky handwriting on that first page. "I am leaving it all to you. Because you are the only one I trust to make a plan that isn't driven by panic. They cut me off for doing the thing he asked me to do, I said slowly. So maybe the question isn't how to get them back. It's how not to betray myself trying. She nodded. That sounds like a painful kind of freedom, she said. Which is still freedom. About a year after the will reading, just as the Texas heat was starting to loosen its grip and the mornings carried a hint of coolness, I got an email that made my lungs forget how to work for a second. Subject line, hey, it's Mom. The body was short. No greetings. No small talk. Your father is sick. Heart failure. The doctors say it's serious. We are struggling. Chloe says you set up some kind of fund. We haven't seen a dime of it. We need your help, Lucas. Whatever grudge you're holding, it's time to be the bigger person. Mom. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen. Old reflexes flared. Panic. Guilt. That familiar urge to fix it, to buy my way back into their good graces. Alongside them, something steadier rose. I forwarded the email to my therapist, then to Mr. Collins with a brief note. We should probably talk. That afternoon, I called Chloe. I got Mom's email, I said. How bad is it? Her sigh rattled through the speaker. It's not good, she said. He's on meds. They're talking about possibly needing surgery down the line if his condition doesn't improve. He's scared, though he'd never say that out loud. I closed my eyes. How are you? I asked. Really? She was quiet for a second. I'm holding, she said. Therapy helps. The job helps. Knowing I have the option to not drown with them helps. But being in that house again, with both of them in constant crisis mode, it's a lot. I can imagine, I said. Can you? She shot back, but there was no real bite to it. You haven't been here in a year. Guilt pricked. It was true. I'd stayed away, partly out of self-preservation, partly out of stubbornness, partly out of fear that if I stepped back into that kitchen, I'd disappear again. I stayed away because every time I pictured coming back, I saw them trying to pull me into the same fight, I said. But I miss you. And I don't want Dad to die while we're still not speaking. She sighed. Then maybe come for you, she said softly. Not for them. Or come for him, but not on their terms. We sat with that for a moment. Mom mentioned the fund, she added. Don't give it to them. Please. I wasn't planning to, I said. They'll use his sickness as a reason to blow through it in a month, she said. I know that sounds harsh, but it's what they do. Turn everything into a 5-alarm fire so they don't have to look at the slow burns. I thought of the furnace, the washing machine, the string of panicked calls. The way every problem became a justification for more. What do you need? I asked her. Not them. You. She laughed, surprised. A nap? She said. A world where our parents go to their own therapy instead of using us as crutches? Then, more seriously, I could use some help covering time off work to take Dad to appointments. The store is understanding, but they don't pay for missed hours. And if I don't show up, I don't eat. The fund, would that count? It would, I said. We set it up for exactly that. Stability. Not emergencies we didn't create. I'll ask Collins to authorize it. And Mom and Dad? She asked quietly. I was silent. I'll cover some of the medical bills directly, I said finally. Through the hospital. Not cash in their account. I can't open that door again. But I also can't pretend I don't care if Dad gets the care he needs. Good, she said. Because I don't want to lose him either. I just don't want to lose you to their chaos again. When I stepped off the plane in Ohio a week later, the air felt thicker, heavier. As I drove past the Walmart sign and the row of half-empty storefronts, my chest tightened. By the time I turned onto Maple Street, my hands were slick on the steering wheel. The blue house looked the same and older, both at once. A new stain bloomed under the gutter. The porch sagged a little more. I parked and sat there for a moment, watching the lace curtain flutter in the front window. Then I got out and walked up the steps. The board creaked in the same place. The door opened before I could knock. Mom stood there, thinner than I remembered, hair more gray at the temples. Her eyes searched my face as if trying to decide who she was looking at. Lucas, she said. I half expected her to fold me into a hug. She didn't. She stepped aside. Come in, she said. He's in the living room. Dad sat in his recliner, a thin blanket over his lap, an oxygen concentrator humming softly beside him. He looked small. Not physically. He was still broad-shouldered, but smaller in that way people get when life's taken something out of them they don't know how to get back. His eyes flicked to me, then away. Hey, I said, standing in the doorway like a guest. He grunted, which I decided to interpret as hello. Chloe hovered at the edge of the room, leaning against the doorway to the kitchen. She gave me a tiny, wry smile. I returned it. The room was thick with unsaid things. Apologies, accusations, memories. I pulled the old dining chair into the living room and sat across from Dad, leaving enough space between us that neither of us felt crowded. "How are you feeling?" I asked. He shrugged, the movement making the tubing rustle. "Like an old car with a busted engine," he muttered. "They say the meds might keep me going a while. Or they might not. Depends if I adjust my lifestyle." He said the last part in a mocking sing-song that told me exactly how he felt about adjusting anything. "That must be scary," I said. He snorted. "Everything's scary once doctors start saying percentages instead of answers," he said. We sat in that brittle silence for a moment. "I heard you've been helping with the bills," he said abruptly. "Collins called about some payment. Said not to worry about the deposit." "That was me," I said. "I told him to keep you updated so you didn't stress about collection notices." He looked at me then, properly, for the first time. "Why?" he asked. No gratitude in the word, just confusion. Challenge. "Because heart failure is enough to deal with without debt collectors on top of it," I said simply. "And because, despite everything, you're my dad." His jaw worked. "And the farm?" he asked. "You selling it out from under us? Turning it into condos?" "No," I said. "I leased it to the Rodriguezes. They're working it. It stays a farm. For now, anyway." He grunted again. This time it sounded less hostile. "Maybe." Mom hovered on the perimeter, arms crossed, eyes moving between us like she was watching a tennis match played in slow motion. Eventually, she burst. "You should have just given it to him," she said suddenly, glaring at me. "The farm, the money, all of it. None of this would be happening if you'd just done the right thing." I felt my shoulders tense, but before I could answer, Chloe spoke up. "Mom," she said quietly. "Stop." Mom whipped her head toward her. "Stop what?" she demanded. "Telling the truth? Your brother's sitting on a fortune while we struggle. That fortune is the only reason I have a therapist, or a stable place to live, or a job I can keep," Chloe said, standing straighter. Her voice shook, but she didn't back down. "It's the only reason these hospital bills aren't going to eat us alive. Lucas didn't cause Dad's heart to fail. He didn't cause the farm to fall apart. Grandpa trusted him with a plan because we've proven over and over that we can't be trusted with one." Mom's mouth opened, then closed. I stared at my sister, a lump in my throat. Dad shifted, wincing. "Let her talk," he muttered when Mom started to protest again. Chloe took a breath. "You two raised us on emergencies," she said. "Everything was always a catastrophe. The rent, the car, my bad decisions, Lucas's good ones. We never got to just be. And then when Grandpa tried to put a stop to that, you turned on the only person who's been holding this whole thing together since he was 16. Her eyes flashed to mine. "I was mad at you too. At first," she admitted. "It felt unfair, like he was picking his favorite. But then I read the letter he left me and the one he left you. And I realized he wasn't picking favorites. He was trying to break a machine that was grinding all of us up." She looked back at our parents. "You called me useless my whole life. You used that as an excuse to never expect anything from me, to never give me real tools, to keep me small so you could keep feeling needed. I let you, because it was easier. Because being the fragile one meant I didn't have to face how scared I was. But I'm done letting that story run me. And I'm done letting you use it to beat Lucas over the head every time he doesn't hand over everything he has." The room buzzed with the weight of her words. Mom sank slowly into the nearest chair, her face crumpling. "We just did what we knew," she whispered. "We were so afraid you'd both end up like us. Tired, broke, stuck. We thought if we protected you hard enough, you'd be safe. And in the process, you made me believe I couldn't survive without you," Chloe said. "And you made Lucas believe he didn't have a right to survive without saving us first." Tears slipped down Mom's cheeks. She wiped at them angrily. "We're old," she said. "We don't know how to talk like you do. Patterns, boundaries. We just know the lights have to stay on and the mortgage has to be paid." I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "I'm not asking you to learn therapy speak," I said. "I'm asking you to accept that help is going to look different now, that I won't give you everything, that sometimes I'm going to say no. And that saying no isn't me forgetting where I come from. It's me trying to make sure I don't end up in the hospital next to Dad from stress." Dad let out a breath that was almost a laugh. Would be a hell of a 2-for-1, he muttered. Then, more seriously, I don't know how to do this either, son. Being weak. Being the one in the bed. He gestured at his chest. I spent my whole life thinking being a man meant carrying everything until you dropped. I taught you that without meaning to. Maybe your grandpa saw it and decided to throw a wrench in it. He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again. I said some things I shouldn't have, he added. The closest thing to an apology I'd ever heard from him. About you not being my son. About being done. Truth is, I was pissed at my old man, not you. But you were the one standing there. I swallowed hard. I was pissed too, I said. At you. At Mom. At myself. At everyone. But I'm tired of being mad all the time. I'm not asking us to pretend the past didn't happen. I am asking that if we're going to have anything going forward, it's on different terms. Terms, Mom echoed faintly. With our own son. Yes, I said. With your son. Because if I keep operating on the old ones, I stop being a person and go back to being an ATM. I support you where I can without wrecking myself. I support Chloe in building the life she wants, not just putting out fires. I keep the farm from being carved up. That's what I can do. That's what I'm willing to do. And what can we do? Dad asked slowly. It was a question I hadn't expected. I looked at him. At the man who'd slammed his hand on the kitchen table. At the man who'd taught me how to change a tire and how to throw a punch. At the man who'd chosen fear more times than I could count. Go to your appointments, I said. Take your meds. Let Chloe help without tearing her down. Let Mom cry without making her feel weak. Maybe, someday, go talk to someone who isn't us about why everything has to be a crisis. Mom scoffed weakly. Therapy, she said. At our age. People older than you learn new tricks all the time, Chloe said. Mrs. Jenkins next door started yoga last year, and now she can stand on one foot longer than I can. Despite herself, Mom huffed out a watery laugh. Dad sighed. Well, think about it, he said, which, coming from him, was practically a promise. We didn't hug and cry and magically become a healthy family in that moment. This wasn't a movie. Years of resentment and misplaced roles don't evaporate in a single afternoon. But something shifted. Not a dramatic lurch. More like the slow, almost imperceptible turn of a ship that's been off course for a long time. Over the next few months, we settled into a new rhythm. I paid the hospital directly for a portion of Dad's bills, using money from the farm lease. I refused requests for emergency cash that somehow always involved credit card debt accumulated from things that weren't emergencies at all. Mom and I spoke on the phone once a week. Sometimes we argued. Sometimes we had almost normal conversations about the weather, about the neighbor's dog, about the tomato plants that refused to grow. Sometimes we said nothing important at all, and it was enough. Dad and I texted occasionally. Short, gruff messages. They adjusted my meds. Don't feel like trash today. Cardinals back at the feeder. Grandpa woulda liked that. Chloe sent photos from her art class. Sketches, paintings, messy charcoal hands. She sent me a picture one day of a small, bright studio space with the caption, just signed a lease. Month to month. My name on it. Not theirs. Proud of you. I texted back. Love you. She replied, love you too. And I realized it was the first time we'd written those words without them being sandwiched between crises. The farm stayed a farm. The Rodriguezes sent me emails with photos of calves, of harvested fields, of sunsets that looked like the ones I remembered from Grandpa's porch. I started visiting twice a year. Once in the spring, once in the fall. I slept in the farmhouse, mowed the overgrown patch by the fence, oiled the hinges on the barn door. Sometimes I'd sit in the recliner with Grandpa's letter and feel him there, not as a weight on my shoulders, but as a hand on my back. I didn't move back. I didn't sell. I didn't cave. Life in Austin, my job, my friends, my therapist, my coffee shop mornings, remained my center. Ohio became a place I visited, not the gravity I orbited. One July, as I sat on the farm porch sipping coffee, Mom joined me. She eased herself into the second chair with a soft sigh. I was wrong, she said abruptly, staring out at the fields. I blinked. About? I asked. About calling Chloe useless, she said. About calling you selfish. About thinking love meant smoothing everything over till there was nothing left. She twisted her hands in her lap. I didn't know another way, she said. My folks were hard. If you weren't bleeding, they didn't want to hear it. When I had you and your sister, I promised myself I'd never be like that. That I'd protect you from everything. Only, I didn't protect you from myself. Or from your father. I turned you into tools. One to fix everything. One to need fixing. Her voice shook. Tears pricked my own eyes. I don't know if I can be different at this age, she said. But I see what we did now. A little. Because of this. She gestured vaguely at the farm, at the air between us. Because of him. She nodded toward the recliner visible through the open door. And because you didn't do what we expected, she added. If you'd handed it all over like before, we'd still be screaming at you and draining you dry. I hate that it took losing you for a while to see that. But I'm glad you didn't listen to us. I swallowed hard. I didn't do it to punish you, I said. I did it because I was drowning. And because Grandpa handed me a rope and told me not to throw it back. I know, she said. I just wanted you to hear that I know. We sat in silence, side by side. The kind of silence that, for once, didn't feel like an accusation. After a while, she chuckled softly. You know what Henry used to say when your father complained about me spending money on unnecessary things? She asked. What? I said. She lowered her voice, mimicking Grandpa's gruff tone. Son, you can't take it with you. And if you try, the IRS will be the one laughing at your funeral, she quoted. Then he'd slip me $50 and tell me to go buy myself something that wasn't on sale. I laughed, startled. Sounds like him, I said. He's probably up there right now shaking his head at all this, she said. But maybe also proud that you actually did it. Broke the thing. Broke what? I asked. She gestured around us. All of this, she said. This idea that love and sacrifice are the same thing. That we had to bleed you to prove we mattered. That Chloe had to stay small so we could feel big. That's what got turned upside down when he left you that farm. I thought of the title my brain would later give this chapter of my life. My parents cut me off for my useless sister. Then Grandpa's inheritance turned everything upside down. You're not useless, I said quietly, more to myself than anyone. Neither of us are. She nodded. No, she said. You're not. Years later, when people ask me about my family, I don't offer them the Hallmark version. I don't pretend everything's fine now, wrapped up with a neat bow. My relationship with my parents is complicated. There are still days my mother slips into old patterns, calls me crying about a bill, and I have to remind both of us of the limits I've set. There are still days my father's pride flares, and he makes a snide comment about city money or fancy therapy, and I have to decide whether to bite back or let it go. My relationship with Chloe is different, stronger. We fight sometimes, not about money, but about art, about politics, about the best way to cook eggs. We also celebrate her first solo show at a tiny gallery downtown. The day she paid 3 months' rent in advance with money she'd earned teaching kids how to paint. The Henry Miller Education and Stability Fund still exists. It's smaller now. We've used it for counseling, for classes, for a security deposit when she moved to a better neighborhood with a roommate she actually chose, not whoever happened to need a bed. She calls me her annoying investor. Always asking for reports, she jokes. But in a good way. The farm is still there. The White House, the barn, the fields. The Rodriguez's kids run in the yard now, their laughter echoing off the same walls that once held my grandparents quiet. Sometimes I think about selling it, using the money to buy a place closer to Austin. Sometimes I don't think about it at all for months. The weight of the decision is still there, but it no longer feels like an emergency. Grandpa's voice has faded from a shout to a steady hum. Take your time, boy, it seems to say. Land's patient. Beat, too. As for me, I keep going to therapy. I keep working. I get promoted. I quit. I start something new. I make friends who know me not as the useful son or the strong one, but as Lucas, the guy who makes bad puns and overthinks restaurant menus. I still feel the old tug sometimes when someone I love is in trouble, a reflexive urge to fix, to bleed, to give until I'm empty. But now, more often than not, another voice joins in. A quiet, stubborn one that sounds a lot like an old farmer with dirt under his nails. It says, it's not your job to fix this family. It's your job to live a life you can stand living. And on the days when the guilt feels heavy, when my mother's words about being the bigger person echo too loud, I pull out Grandpa's letter. I read the lines where he tells me I'm allowed to be safe, that I owe gratitude, not my whole life, that stepping off a sinking ship isn't betrayal, it's survival. Then I put the letter back in its envelope, look around at the life I've built, the small apartment, the messy kitchen, the phone buzzing with a photo from Chloe of a painting she's just finished, and I feel something I didn't think I'd ever feel again after that night my father said he was done with me. I feel okay. Not triumphant. Not vindicated. Just okay. And sometimes, in a family like mine, that's not just enough. It's everything.